Diplomatic relations between the United States and Venezuela reached a new low this past week when on Monday, September 30th, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro announced the expulsion of 3 top U.S. diplomats working in Venezuela.
3 diplomáticos norteamericanos. Le he dicho al canciller Elías Agua que proceda de inmediato a expulsarlos del país. Tienen 48 horas para irse de este país. Los funcionarios Kelly Kerdelin, Elizabeth Husman y David Mu, fuera de Venezuela. Yankee Jojón, fuera de Venezuela. Ya basta de abusos contra la dignidad de una patria que quiere paz. Fuera de aquí.
The U.S. government's reaction to this expulsion did not take long, and on Tuesday the State Department announced that 3 Venezuelan diplomats, including the recently appointed Venezuelan chargé d'affaires in Washington, Calixto Ortega, as well as an assistant of his and the consul in Houston, were declared persona non grata. According to diplomatic custom, such a tit-for-tat retaliation is customary, except for the fact that the U.S. retaliated by expelling a higher-ranking official, a Venezuelan consul, for the expulsion of its vice-consul. Both the U.S. State Department and the departing head of the U.S. Embassy in Caracas, Kelly Keiderling, vehemently denied President Maduro's accusations of being involved in efforts to destabilize the government. Keiderling went as far as to make the unusual move of holding a press conference shortly before her departure, where she argued that her meetings had been perfectly normal meetings within the realm of her work as a diplomat.
Hacen todas las embajadas en el mundo y si no la están haciendo, pues no están haciendo un muy buen trabajo. La idea de que no nos podamos reunir con tal grupo, pero solo con tal grupo, eso queda fuera de lo que es el mundo diplomático. Todas las acusaciones de sabotaje, de conspiración, de que nosotros vamos a acabar con el mundo, todas son falsas.
President Maduro reacted angrily to Keiderling's press conference, saying that Keiderling had acted arrogantly and petulantly in her press conference. Venezuela's foreign minister, Elias Hawa, also criticized Keiderling's efforts at explaining her actions, saying that the Venezuelan intelligence service had proof that Keiderling and the other 2 diplomats were not engaged in normal fact-finding meetings, but were actively supporting protests in the labor movement and the indigenous populations of Bolívar and Amazonas state.
Funcionarios entrando a esta sede de la organización, donde informantes nuestros dentro de esa organización pudieron verificar cómo se trabajó la idea nuevamente de un desconocimiento de las elecciones de cara al 8 de diciembre, especialmente en el estado Bolívar. El informe está a la orden del secretario Kerry. Si él quiere saber qué hacen sus funcionarios aquí, si es que no lo sabe, aquí está toda la información con fotos, con los testimonios, con los cargos, con las reuniones grabadas, fotografiadas, de la actuación absolutamente ilegal de estos funcionarios de la Embajada de los Estados Unidos.
A large part of the reason why U.S. government meetings with opposition officials is such a sensitive issue to the Venezuelan government is because these meetings took place in Bolívar state, a state with a long history of labor unrest and the country's most important region for resource extraction, including oil, iron, aluminum, gold, and other minerals. Also, the decision to expel U.S. diplomats comes on the heels of a series of recent spats with the U.S. government, beginning with Maduro's announcement last March, on the day that President Chavez died, that he was expelling 2 U.S. military attachés for allegedly meeting with Venezuelan military officials in an effort to enlist their opposition to the government. Then last June, all of Latin America was outraged at the treatment that Bolivia's President Evo Morales received when his plane was declined overflight privileges in Europe, presumably at the behest of the Obama administration in its suspicion that NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden was hiding on Morales' plane. This incident combined with Snowden-related revelations that were published shortly thereafter, according to which the U.S. was actively tapping the phones and emails of Latin American government officials, particularly of the Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff, who subsequently canceled a state visit to Washington, D.C. And then just last week, Maduro complained that the U.S. had denied him overflight privileges over Puerto Rico on his way to a state visit to China. Some critics of the Venezuelan government, such as New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez, argue that the real reason relations between the U.S. and Venezuela are souring have to do with Maduro's effort to distract the Venezuelan public from problems within Venezuela, such as inflation and food shortages. While it is no doubt true that inflation and shortages have been serious problems in Venezuela this past year, both issues have become less acute in recent months. The argument that Maduro is seeking to distract from domestic problems might seem plausible at first glance, but the history of US-Venezuela relations has been very tense for a long time, especially since the US appeared to support the 2002 coup attempt against President Chavez. More recently, relations between the two countries took another turn for the worse in early 2010, when then-President Chavez refused to accept the new US ambassador to Venezuela because he had made disparaging remarks about the Venezuelan military, upon which the US expelled the Venezuelan ambassador to the US, Bernardo Alvarez. The two countries have not had ambassadors in each other's countries since then. Venezuelan government officials point to this history of US interference in Venezuelan affairs as being the cause for the bad relations, and that they are not the result of an effort to distract from domestic problems. Problems of inflation and shortages are an important concern in Venezuela today, but it is not clear whether they have more to do with the active efforts at destabilization on the part of the opposition or with failures of the government. Government supporters such as the head of the Consumer Protection Agency, Eduardo Saman, argue that it is no coincidence that these issues keep cropping up whenever there are elections in Venezuela, such as this year, when there was a presidential election, and in December, there will be local elections for mayors and city councils. In short, a sense of all-round siege has been rising among Venezuelan government officials and their supporters recently, and U.S. government actions such as the denying of airspace for presidential travel or U.S. diplomats meeting with opposition organizations easily contribute to the greater tensions and the further deterioration of U.S.-Venezuela relations.